Reducing the reliance on coal is a major issue at COP26, yet many developing countries need cheap, accessible energy to fuel their economies, just as developed countries did during their industrialization. How to strike a balance between development and climate goals? How long will it take the world to wean itself off coal? I'm pleased to be joined from Guangzhou, southern China, by Professor Chi Ye, Director of the Institute for Public Policy at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and from Singapore by Philip Andrew Speed, Senior Principal Fellow of the Energy Studies Institute at the National University of Singapore. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So for developing countries, an increase in living standards would require an increase in energy consumption. Damilola Ogunbiyi, who is the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All, said this. She said that 759 million people in this world still lacks access to basic electricity, and over 2.6 billion don't have access to clean cooking solutions. But Mr. Andrew Speed, is this an opportunity or obstacle for energy transition?
Good morning, Liu Xin. Good to be with you again.
Good morning.
In principle, it's an opportunity, particularly for electricity. Most of these people mentioned, the 749 million, live in rural or semi-rural areas or small towns where it should be easy in principle to install local grids, rooftop solar and renewable energy infrastructure like that. So the electricity issue should be relatively easy, given that the costs of these forms of renewable energy are declining. Clean cooking, I think, is more difficult because many people do not like cooking on electricity. And so you can produce, there are two problems with cooking with traditional biomass. One is the smoke that is bad for the health, and there are clean biomass fuel stoves being made available, though how fast? I guess not fast enough. The future may be bioethanol, but that is not moving along very fast. So the electricity is relatively straightforward. I think the cooking is more difficult.
Professor Chi, how do you look at it? I think that the key word here is time, right? How much time do you have before you provide these people with reliable energy sources, and yet without having to, without these people having to pay a price that they can afford?
Exactly. I think this is a huge challenge. More than 10% of the world population now does not really have the access to this clean energy or any other kind of energy. This is then that's why they have to rely on this biofuel for their cooking and for their daily living. And this is a huge challenge to energy transition, and also for our collective effort to climate action. Well, that's why we really need the minimum $100 billion to actually help these people for the minimum living standard. And this is not for a luxury consumption. I think we have to, when we're talking about climate change issues, they're very, very important. Let's do not neglect these very people that we need to take care, and they have no access. They need the affordable solution for their own energy transition and energy supply.
Professor Chi, let me stay with you. A key topic here is to phase out coal at the COP26, and a non-binding pledge to phase out coal gained the support of 23 more countries at this year's conference, but did not include Australia, India, the United States, and China. Now, this pledge would require richer nations to quit coal power by the 2030s and poorer ones by the 2040s. How likely is the pledge to materialize, and what are behind China's consideration?
Well, phasing out coal is certainly very important because coal is the dirtiest and it's also the highest carbon content fuel, and we really need to phase out coal in order to reach our carbon neutrality. I think China does have the target to phase out coal at some point. And on the other hand, we realize coal is probably the cheapest, economically cheapest solution for many countries. But that is because we're not counting the cost for human life, for our environment. And a lot of the countries now still relying on coal. Well, Australia and China are very different. China, starting 2013, 8 years ago, is reached somewhat plateau for coal consumption. And ever since 2013, we have seen a decline of coal consumption over the years, with probably slightly increased this year in 2021 for a very special reason. Australia, on the other hand, they're relying on coal for export. This is very, very different for their economic growth. And we all understand why this is happening. And, United States, and the coal consumption also reached the peak in about 2005, and since then have been declining. And I think every country has its own situation. And for 2030, I think that target may be good for many different countries, but we have also need to understand the situations that many other countries are facing and allowing some time for a realistic target. And different countries really have their very different stages of development economically, also in terms of energy consumption.
Well, another example of this kind of, clear-cut targets or pledge is about methane. And Mr. Andrew Speed, at the COP26, 104 countries signed a commitment to reduce their methane emissions by 30% between 2020 and 2030. Again, some countries have opted not to sign for the time being, including China, India, Russia, Turkey, Australia. How can we understand these countries' decisions? Are they the same?
Yes, I mean, it's very similar to what Professor Chie was saying about coal, except in the case of Russia, their issue is gas, and so the methane in those cases is leaking from gas fields and gas pipelines and gas-using appliances. To a certain extent, also in Turkey and in China, the same problem, but in the coal mining countries, the leakage of methane is actually from the coal mines themselves. And this can be massive. And so actually, even if you close a coal mine, there can be methane leakage. So I think for the major coal mining countries like China and India, dealing with methane in the long term is going to be really difficult. So I think their unwillingness to sign up to this quite ambitious pledge is understandable, even though it is disappointing.
Professor Chi, what is driving China not to sign up to this pledge about methane? Is it because of China's unwilling, or China is unable, or China just doesn't think it is so significant, the methane emissions?
Well, Dr. Speed just pointed out, several sources, from gas flare, from coal mines. But a very important source for methane here in China is from the rice paddy, from agriculture, farming, right? This is the part that you actually have very limited means to phase out the methane. And you want to grow rice, which is the most important source of grain here in China.
Sure.
And then definitely, there is no way you can phase out that part now technologically. And making a promise, making a commitment is easy, but deliver that commitment is a different story. So I think China is very cautious when making a promise. In 2009, and China promised a 40 to 45% of decrease in carbon intensity. In the end, it delivered 48%.
Right.
Same thing about the 2060 target for carbon neutrality. And I think China take very measured approach in making the promise and making this kind of commitment. Same thing about methane. And in the entire world, we do not really have the technology to phase out methane for rice paddy. For others, and then what's the point to make an undeliverable commitment.
Mr. Andrew Speed, would you like to react to that? Would you like to add anything?
No, I think the pointing out the agricultural issue, just the same as with New Zealand and their cattle, it's a big challenge, yes, with the rice. Okay,
moving on, in terms of the clean energy transition, China is the world's most prolific producer of wind energy, and it has about 1/3 of the world's solar generation capacity, and building more solar systems last year than any other country. Professor Chi, is such production capacity going to translate neatly into China's energy transition?
It's going to be fundamentally important, but this is not enough to make the transition. China has been growing very rapidly in terms of wind power production and also the solar power generation. But still, this is a very limited share. And in terms of the additionality, this is really making a huge change. But still, majority of the power is produced from coal-fired power plants. I think this is we need to go through a extended period of time to actually have the clean energy, wind, solar, water, and hydropower to be the dominant source. And no, it's not going to be a neat process, and this will be taking some time for the transition.
Dr. Andrew Speed, there is some concern about the grid stability with renewable energy sources. For example, some people in Texas in America blamed renewable energy for the southern states' power outages when extreme winter storms caused widespread blackouts earlier this year. And China's recent electricity shortages are also attributed by some to unanticipated energy demand spikes and shortfalls in renewable electricity production. How do you look at these concerns?
Well, let's start first with Texas. I mean, the story that they had the blackouts because of the failure of the wind farms is completely false. Indeed, the regulator in Texas had already planned for potential lack of wind power if the weather was cold. No, the real problem was that gas production facilities froze, and so they couldn't produce gas, and again some gas-fired power stations didn't operate in the very cold weather. So no, the problem lay with the gas infrastructure. That is very clear. If we switch back to China, yes, in parts of China there was a shortfall of wind for a short period of time, and in the southwest hydro was a little lower than normal because of the drought. But the critical problem, if we're talking about the recent crisis, was a shortage of coal supply combined with an unwillingness of some coal-fired power stations to dispatch to generate electricity because the cost of coal was high and the cost of electricity was low. So yes, there are issues with the intermittency of renewable energy such as wind and solar and grid stability, but this was not the cause of the energy shortages that China has recently experienced.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to my guests, as always, Professor Chi Ye from Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and Philip Andrew Speed at National University of Singapore. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Luxin in Beijing. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.